The Bald-Headed Bistro has a brand new menu offering more value for your dollar. The Bald-Headed Bistro, Western fine dining in the heart of the South. The best bar and happy hour in town. The Bald-Headed Bistro in the Village Green, Cleveland.
Customer confidence. It means a lot at Buy Here, Pay Here USA. That's why we have a comprehensive customer confidence plan for every vehicle we sell. We know that you could go anywhere to purchase your next vehicle, but we want you to visit us first and find out what sets us apart. When you're ready to purchase your next vehicle, visit Buy Here, Pay Here USA for a large selection of pre-owned vehicles. You'll be confident you made the right choice. Buy Here, Pay Here USA in Cleveland or Dayton. Visit BuyHerePayHereUSA.com for more details.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
Every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239 or go see him
Every Saturday.
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, 961-7239.
Pick up your copy of Confederate Voices and the History of Caney Creek book and DVD at the Museum Center at 5 Points or OldTownCleveland.com. Get your copy now, and don't forget, tune in every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock for Old Town Cleveland, right here on 99.9 Whoop FM.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Where'd the old town go? They moved it all north of here in a shopping mall.
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, if my voice will last.
Oh, no.
You can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com or you can call us here at 614-5553. In the world of rock and roll, Phil Everly died, one of the Everly brothers.
Wake up, little Susie.
So I played some of those songs here this morning just in honor of them. And
I hope everybody enjoyed the local music, too, that you played today. I know that you played Dalton Roberts. And
Pooh Bah.
And Pooh Bah.
Pooh Bah's not local, but he comes here a lot.
That's right.
He played You're the Reason My Children Are Ugly. Okay.
Good morning.
I never sing that song.
No, you should never sing that song, especially when your wife's in the room.
Because I got pretty kids.
That's right.
Okay, yeah. Deb, tell us about today.
Good morning. It's January the 4th, 2014. It's very cold outside this morning. Please be sure to bring your pets in and wrap up the pipes because I believe we're in for a few days of this really nasty cold stuff. Got a lot of friends online this morning, and the computer had a hiccup a few minutes ago and dumped them all off, and they've signed back on. We have Ken Rush with us today from the museum at the Copper Basin Museum.
Ducktown Basin Museum.
Ducktown Basin.
I get it wrong every time.
We'll get it by the end of the day.
Of course, if he'd gotten here before 4 minutes before the show, I'd been able to write that down.
I thought we weren't going to mention that.
But see what she says it wrong so that we can correct her and you get more
there you
time
go.
of seeing what it is.
I see how that works.
Yeah.
Well, Ken is one of your favorite guest here on Old Town Cleveland because he knows just about everything there is to know about everything east of here. Hey, Ken, have you heard any of those big booms, the big noises going on?
No, I have not.
No, okay. Well, we actually heard one last night. There's a phenomenon going on that was first in Happened where,
They've
Ron?
first heard it in Rhode Island. Now they've heard
We're
it
serious.
Georgia,
We're serious.
Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and it sounds just like an explosion. That on Tuesday night.
Are these the meteors?
No, these
Well,
were they
they
shook the
can't-
houses there in Polk County, and then people over in Bradley County heard it, and then people in Bradley County heard it, and we heard it last night.
Yeah,
And
we're all way over next to the interstate.
The government has no idea why there are these booms going all around the country.
Technically, it's one of those things that they said, well, the Earth could be repositioning itself on its axis.
Or now, if you
Or
watch the
it's
war,
heating and it's cooling off a little bit because of the cold, and so therefore it makes some sound. I'll tell you what it sounded like. It sounded like the rumble from an earthquake, but it had no shake to it. And Ron and I both we heard it inside our house last night, about 7:30 or something. And I put it on Facebook, and a lot of folks that live over in the 411 Spring Place Road, that kind of area down in Buck's Pocket, were commenting on Facebook that they heard it also. So it's just some natural phenomenon that's going on.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, like I say. But I think if you watch the War of the Worlds, there's something buried, and them things are exploding, getting ready to come out.
Or,
then,
or maybe like Transformers.
Right. It could be. And then, if you watch Mars Attack, I have got here in the system some Slim Whitman records. So if we get attacked,
We're ready.
Whoop will be a safe place.
Yes.
We got Slim Whitman. We'll blast out into the mall.
I want to name one more person that was famous that everyone will remember that passed this week is Alicia Rhett, and she's the last survivor of Gone with the Wind, and she was one of the Wilkes girls. I believe she's the one that says she married all the good boys, and I'm going to die an old maid. But anyway, that's the very last survivor of Gone with the Wind, that classic, and we'd like to say good morning to all of our friends up at Signature Healthcare. I believe they take a lot of the patients into the cafeteria early in the morning and feed them breakfast, and then they're still hanging around and they listen to our show, and we're glad to have them listening with us. And we want to report that Randy Fox says there's ice on Keith Street.
Right, it's $1.29 a bag.
There you go.
I was going to say, I just came down Key Street, looked all clear.
Yeah, there's a shop right over there. Only Randy, I think.
Okay, we're going to be talking about the mines and
all the copper basin,
anything
the Ducktown Basin.
that if you guys have questions about something about east of here, you just need to let us know this morning. I want to start off with the questioning.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, over the centuries, tons of stuff has been taken out of the ground at Copper Hill.
Correct.
How in the world did they know something was there, and when did they start digging for it?
It's a good question. The first notice was just prior to the removal treaty, when the Cherokee were coming out, were going to be removed. They didn't actually go of their own free will. Right. But the state of Tennessee sent their geologist through to do what we'd call a windshield survey today. He was doing it from horseback. He didn't take time to investigate anything in detail, but he traveled through this area that was about to become part of the state of Tennessee. And he noticed what he called several outcroppings of hydroxide of iron, which is what had happened to the ore deposits as they had weathered over geologic time. The deposits in the basin, almost all of them had eroded, or more accurately, the surrounding ground had eroded away and left them exposed. And there's a lot of iron pyrite in the ore, and that weathered over geologic time to where it looked like you had these little rusty knobs, and that was that hydroxide of iron that Dr. Troost noticed. And so that's the first notice. But the actual discovery of copper came 6 years later in 1843 when a gentleman prospecting for gold named Lemons came through the area. After Dahlonega, you had prospectors all through these mountains looking for the next strike, and he was working down in a stream cut where it had cut into the unaltered ore. And again, at first glance, those pyrite crystals, he thought he had found gold. But on closer examination, he realized he had found what he called an oxide of iron and copper. He had saw where the chalcopyrite, the copper mineral, and the pyrite, the iron mineral, had been exposed by the creek cutting into the deposit. So that's the first discovery of copper.
I was just curious, how would they know, to look under the ground? I think one thing that Ron and I went over into Georgia a few weeks ago, and went over to Dahlonega, and I think that one of the most interesting things I found out there was the fact there was a mint over there.
Yes.
And the mint building is still standing.
Yes.
I thought that was very interesting. I had no idea. And then, of course, that made for a military academy to guard the mint. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it just puts another little interesting speck of history throughout this area.
And you can tour a gold mine that's
Have
not
you done
working.
that?
I have, a long time ago.
Now,
Well, you go under Walmart.
Yes, I was going to say, you go down the staircase.
Then that makes me wonder if when Walmart bought the property, what about the mineral rights under the ground? I would think that they would have had to have some kind of an agreement there.
Well, a lot of, I don't know about in that area, but I know a lot in the basin, the mineral rights were shaved off of the property rights. So there are many people in eastern Polk County that own their property, but they do not own the mineral rights under them.
And a lot of folks don't know that that's true here in Bradley County, too, down in the Dalton Pike area where they found magnesium something or another. That they also, in the deeds that I have read for that area, that they had given up their rights, or they kept their mineral rights and sold the property.
What did they use copper for in pre-removal times? I mean, what was...
Well, copper has... it was one of the first metals man learned to work. And, you know, one of the big uses for copper are in some alloys, bronze and brass. And so copper was used for those. And then copper's always been used for ornamental purposes. You know, it's very decorative. It's very shiny. I mean, we use it a lot in our homes today. You'll see copper items on the walls in homes. But the big uses at that point of our history would have been going into those alloys, because that's when we're beginning to mechanize the Industrial Revolution, and you've got steam engines being built, and you've got factories that are now being powered. So a lot of it went toward those uses.
Did the Indians use it for anything, the Cherokee?
The Cherokee did use copper, again, because it's too soft to be an effective tool. It was a lot of ceremonial and ornamental items. And there is an account from the 1880s where the gentleman discovers what very much sounds like a Cherokee hearth where they'd been smelting. And when I talked about that weathering, all that copper and sulfur that washed out of that top that left the iron redeposited at the water table, and you had a zone that they referred to as the black copper or the enriched zone. And where the ore normally is about 2 to 3% copper, this enriched zone could be 40 to 50%. So it had been very easily worked, and talked with several anthropologists, and almost all agree now that the Cherokee would have worked the copper found in the basin. The big debate today is whether they developed that technology independently or whether they learned it from the Spanish. Because when the Spanish explorers came through, they're using Indians for guides, and they're smelting and all along the way. So
I'd say that the Cherokee probably had their own methods, and maybe they may have learned a little bit from each other, is kind of what I found out. You know, a lot of times, you know, we just don't give the Cherokee the credit that they deserve of how advanced they were.
very true.
They did that before YouTube and everything.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Now, anytime we have a question at our house, I have to go look on YouTube to see if somebody put a video on that.
The ore, you know, copper is, of course, what we all think of with Copper Hill. But what other ores did they mine, or that was secondary, and that they also sold?
Okay. The ore is referred to today as a massive. You've got several different sulfide minerals all combined together. But from that, and this is 20th century, from the 1920s forward, they recovered the copper, obviously, the iron, the zinc, and the sulfur. So all four of those elements were recovered and sold at varying levels of profit. And then there's a very tiny, a trace amount of gold, and that was recovered as well. But the money was made on the sulfur and the copper. The iron and zinc were about a break-even deal, as was the gold. The money was made on the sulfur and the copper.
How many mine shafts are in Copper Hill?
It would be hard to put a number on shafts without me doing some serious ciphering on paper, but there's 9 different ore bodies within the bounds of Polk County that were commercially mined, and then there's 3 smaller ones across the line in Fannin, Georgia. And in the early period, in the 1850s, some of those deposits had multiple owners. So I might own the north end, and you may own the middle, and you may own the south end, and we've all three got shafts on our claim working the deposit. So when you get into the 20th century, most of the ore bodies had one or two major shafts on them. These are the verticals that are going at depth.
Okay. Now, this is a question, when the mine's closed, who owned the mine? And when I say who owned the mine, I'm sure you can give me a company name, but who was that company? Who was the big names that were behind the copper companies?
Well, they're at the end, they're not guys that you and I are going to know. It was Tennessee Chemical Company, which was a group that was formed in the 80s, and I believe Bruce Davis was their CEO. But they were just a group of investors that had formed to purchase this property. Some of the same money behind Hooker Chemical, which is Love Canal. Some of the same money that was behind the nuclear processing plant up at Irwin, where they were producing fuel rods for the nuclear reactors throughout the country. So it was a group of investors, but they went by the name Tennessee Chemical Company. But they only came into existence in '82. So prior to that, it was City Service Company, which is a large oil and gas concern. And a lot of oil companies got into the mining business in the 1960s and 70s, and then they all got out by the 80s because they found out that just because you know how to extract hydrocarbons from the ground does not mean you know how to mine.
Well, and today I know there's a lot of people in Polk County and Copper Hill would hate to ever see mining start again there. Is there copper in the ground, and why don't we go after it now?
Well, there is copper in the ground, and I feel confident in saying at some point they will mine there again. I also feel pretty confident that you and I will not see that day, even if we live a nice, long, healthy life. There's a couple of reasons. One, when they stopped mining in the 80s, the infrastructure for processing the ore was sold off in the bankruptcy. So to mine again is to start over. So you're looking at a big capital investment on the front end. And I've talked with some people, some retired mine engineers and some retired chemical engineers, and they've said point blank that if you've got that type of capital, it's easier to put it in what we would term a developing country today, where you'd see a faster return on your investment, or expanding an existing operation. And the modern companies, well, let me back up. They never found all the ore in the basin. They never tried to find all the ore in the basin. The deposits are vertical. They're at depth. And they were content to have a 10-year planning reserve. So as long as they had what they anticipated mining in 10 years drilled ahead, they were happy. And that was about 20 million tons, because they were mining a little bit less than 2 million tons a year in the latter part of the 20th century. So when they stopped mining, they've got about 20 million tons already drilled and located. And again, that's a lot if they put it in our yard, but that's not enough for you to spend the money to reopen. So we'll know they're serious about even considering reopening the mines when someone comes in and does a deep core drill campaign to try to find at least, if not the total amount of ore that exists, a greater proven reserve.
When Tennessee Chemical went bankrupt, they owed a lot of people money, including Polk County. Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, how many dollars did they owe Polk County?
Millions of dollars.
Polk County like to have those dollars today.
Yes, they would.
So, but there's no hope if they ever get that.
The final bankruptcy settlement occurred last year because that corporation we talked about owned other assets. As they sold off the stuff, it's like any bankruptcy. A judge came up with a ratio, and you get so many pennies on the dollar, and they determine who gets paid what first. And the last ones holding the empty bag were the employees, because the employees had done a lot of give-backs toward the end to try to keep the mines operating and the company operating. They had given up benefits, they had deferred salaries, and depending again on how much you had given, families in the basin received checks, probably in the neighborhood of $500 to a couple of $1,000, but the last payment was made early in 2013. So the case is now closed. There's no more money. There'll be no more disbursements.
So who owns the property today?
Okay, it's scattered now because when they went bankrupt, some people wanted to buy the chemical plant and operate it. So the bankruptcy courts carved it out of the bankruptcy holdings and sold the plant there going into Copper Hill that most of us are aware of seeing up on the highway. And it went to a company called Belieden Intertrade, and then they sold it to a group called Intertrade, and then they sold it to a group called Marcelux, and then they sold it to a group called BIT Manufacturing, and ultimately it's now in the hands of a company called Copper Hill Industries, and that company owns more or less 1,800 acres. It's basically the footprint that the plant sits on and the properties up behind it and the Callaway ore body. So they do own one of the ore bodies that could potentially be mined in the future. The rest of that land, the bankruptcy courts either sold it off to private hands because the company owned a lot of land that they'd never done any mining on. It went back to them cutting the timber 100 years prior. So a lot of that land now is in private hands, and the owner may or may not own the property rights that goes with that. They did give some people the right to purchase their mineral rights back. And then you've got about another 1,400 to 1,800 acres that's in a trust. That's the land that's currently being remediated and cleaned up by Glen Springs Holdings. But that's not a contiguous tract. It may be 400 acres over by the tailings pond and a couple of hundred acres over at Isabella.
And the holding company's done a great job of restoring.
Well, I feel like they have, yes. And if you've not been there lately, you would be amazed at what some of these properties look like.
Well, the whole basin looks totally different what it was from 1960 when I was a little boy and go up there and thought I was on the moon or in some foreign country or something. It was different.
Let me ask a question about Isabella. My grandmother was born at Isabella, and the family worked around the mines, but not in the mines as far as I know. I think the generations before my great-grandfather actually worked in the mines, but I believe he was sawmiller, and she might have worked in the camps cooking. But I had asked the other day on Facebook the pictorial history of Copper Hill. If you're not a member of that group, it's a really nice group to be a part of because they put nice pictures on there. But I asked if anyone had pictures from Isabella since my grandmother was born there, and somebody posted a picture of the men receiving beer. And what kind of process would that have been?
Actually, I saw that photograph when it went
laughed. I thought, well, that's not exactly what I had in mind, but that's pretty funny.
And we have that photo actually in the museum's collection as well, although it's been copied several times, so I'm not claiming someone violated our copyright. The story we have, and this makes perfect sense, is that the company would arrange for a train car to travel in with kegs of beer. This is the old Isabella company, DSC&I.
About 1900.
That would have been around the turn of the century. If you notice in that photograph, there's several boys with buckets, because they're going to get that bucket of beer to carry back home. And then there's several men sitting around with their mugs enjoying the beer.
It was just a treat, but now
it was a perk.
Someone was talking about what a process they went through, that it came on the trains and then it had to be loaded on a wagon or something. I don't remember the big long process.
Yeah, these were refrigerated trains. Right?
Oh yes, yeah, of course, right.
Good hot beer.
Good, nice, warm beer.
The what is are they hauling down out of the mountain, out of the camps now? Tell us what that is again.
Okay, the haven't hauled in several months now, but it's an on again, off again operation. A lot of moving parts, and we can go into that later if we need to. But the primary item that Copper Hill Industries, the owners of the complex today, has been selling over the last several years has been calcine, which is the iron portion of the ore. We were talking about they separated the iron. They would separate the iron sulfide from the other minerals at the mill, and then that would go to what they call the roaster, and they would heat it enough to burn the sulfur off because they wanted to catch the sulfur and send it to make sulfuric acid. And they were left with an oxide of iron. It's rust. It's a reddish-brown powder. Of course, there's other minerals present, other elements present, but for decades they sold that to Birmingham, and they would blend it with other sources of iron to make steel from it. By the end of the 60s, early 70s, the mills in Birmingham were either closing, as we're all aware, or they began to buy another product called taconite pellets from the Great Lakes states that was a better grade of iron, a better feed. And they didn't want what we had for sale in the basin any longer. So the last 15 or so years they mined, they stockpiled it. Back in the back of the plant, they piled up over 10 million tons of calcine.
It was trash.
No, it's a product.
Waste product.
No, it was a product. I said
Okay.
waste, but I didn't mean that. It was a product that they lost the market for.
So they thought, what else were they going to do with it?
That's right.
So they just piled it
They
up.
piled it up. They stockpiled it. Well, lo and behold, 30 years later, a market returned. There's no longer a domestic market for it, but there's now a global market. You might know it as China.
I first became aware of that when I went down and was taken to see the old Federal Road that goes across Moccasin Bend. And we walked from the Moon Pie place up that giant enormous hill, then over and went across the Federal Road and looked around. Well, when we got up the road, I went, what's this purple stuff all over the ground? And it was the byproducts that are being brought in.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
This is Cece Quorum.
Hey, Cece, how you doing? I know that you posted some things on Facebook. Tell us about your family, or your I think you.
Family is from Polk County, from Copper Hill.
What was their name?
Lon Pope.
Okay. Well, tell us about it.
Being in Copper Hill?
Yeah, tell us all about it. Did you work as an electrician?
No, I worked as a machinist apprentice.
Oh, machinist apprentice. I knew it was some type of apprentice.
Yes, they had to have women. It was back in the 70s at the equal opportunity time. So I went in because my grandfather had been a supervisor there for 40-something years, and he had died. So they brought me in as a laborer. But then they needed a female in the shops. So I begged them to let me be a welder, and they said, no way. They put me in the machine shop because the old men worked with my grandfather, and they took care of me. And so it was interesting. It was a strange place to work. The screens on your porches would just melt away like salt air because of the acid that was coming out of the acid plant.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it's hard for me to talk right now. I've had surgery on my lips.
Oh, it's okay.
You're doing fine. Go ahead.
I'm having a hard time getting my mouth open. But, I stayed there 3 years till they went out on strike. The electricians went out on strike, which shut that plant down for a long time. I think 16 weeks or more.
What union was that? IBEW?
Electricians Union, yeah. They got mad because somebody else was putting a light bulb in. That was back in the days where you couldn't multi-craft.
What year was that?
Now, I was there from 1970 something through 76 because we had the bicentennial.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I left when they were on strike and went to work for UPS.
Okay.
How did
Just couldn't wait.
How did the men treat you when you got there, being, like when women were forced into the workplace there, into jobs that had been on men? How did you get treated?
I was treated great. There were some women that worked. They brought some people in. They put them on top of the railroad house to put the roofing on. But because of my family ties, they treated me like one of them, and with a lot of respect.
That's good.
Was his name Leonard Pope?
No, Lon.
Lon Pope.
Lon
Pope.
Pope. And he lived in McCaysville, Georgia.
Okay.
Never drove a car. Walked to work every day. Took a taxi cab.
So how far of a walk would that be?
From McCaysville?
Yes.
Just across the river, maybe 3 miles.
3 miles.
I was going to say probably 2 or 3 miles.
Mm-hmm. That's farther than anybody will walk to work today.
Of course it is. I work construction now. I'm a supervisor for a scaffold and insulation company in Charleston, South Carolina. And you'd be surprised how hard it is to get anybody to work.
And so when did your family come to that area?
My family was born and raised in that area.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them came out of the Notley River area.
Mm-hmm.
That was the the Raper side of the family
Mm-hmm.
and the Hawkins
Mm-hmm.
out of the Georgia side. So they were raised. My mother was raised there till she was 18. She graduated high school, went to Atlanta, and became Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, I love it.
Okay.
Were you related to Alec Raper's family? Alec.
We're related to all the Raper
Okay.
family.
So well, yeah. My family married into a lot of the men in my family found those pretty Raper girls and married them.
Oh yeah, they love those Raper girls.
What did you think about the area? You grew up there when there was not any trees, and so what did you think about that? I mean, or is it just part of life?
It was part of life. They used the wood to stoke the furnaces. So when the potash, the acid came out of the furnace, it killed all the vegetation. That's why you had nothing in that area.
It did a good job.
It was the acid rain, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, when city service came in and bought it, they started trying to reclaim the land and plant the pine trees. And I think that whoever has it now has done a great job.
It looks totally different now.
But the folks that live up there, that have lived there all their life, sure do miss those red hills.
You do, because you're used to it. It was like being in another world, and places that you could explore, and beautiful graveyards that are sitting in there up on hills that nobody even knows are there.
Yeah, I've often said that had to be the greatest playground ever for a kid growing up. All those hills to slide up and down.
Yeah, go up on the hill into the trash pile and shoot 22s and fill bottles up. It was a great life for a child.
Where did you go to school up at? Was you in McCaysville when you went to school?
No, when I was a little girl,
Mm-hmm.
I was in McCaysville, but we moved. My father was a traveling salesman. I lived in Chicago and Detroit,
Oh, so you moved around a lot.
New Jersey. Yeah, we came to Cleveland when I was in high school. But I knew everybody there because every summer I would spend it up in Copper Hill or Blue Ridge, Georgia, up on the lake.
I always loved to go visit relatives there in Ducktown, and they swept their yard clean because no grass would grow there. And it was always just amazing to me. You get there and everybody had a broom out and they're sweeping the yard.
Yeah, sitting on the front porch eating watermelon and spitting seeds off.
Spitting seeds and making ice cream.
Yeah, my grandmother had a house up on the hill that overlooked the little town of McCaysville with a nice little porch. We'd shoot bottle rockets out from underneath the bottom of it down into town. We were mean kids.
Yeah, there's no humor in that anymore. Now somebody puts you in jail for it now.
I know. And when I went to work as the apprentice, they put me with the preacher because they thought I would be safer with him than anybody else. We got in more trouble than anybody around. Every time somebody'd walk through, he'd take a fire hose and wash them away.
Well, Cece, thanks for. Where are you right now?
Where am I now?
Yeah.
I'm in Folly Beach, South Carolina.
Well, thanks so much for calling. It certainly is nice to have a
you
first-hand testimony.
Are you watching us on the internet?
No, I just was sitting here on the phone. And I thought, well, I'll just call and tell y'all about my experience.
You can catch us on the internet right now at www.whoopfm.com, or about Tuesday, if you go to YouTube and type in Old Town Cleveland, there will be a recording of today's show on there, and you can listen to it from there.
Well, my son still lives in Cleveland. He has a vintage barber shop.
Okay. The Vintage Barber Shop.
What's his name?
Yeah, vintage barber shop.
What's his name?
Jason Corum.
Jason Corum. Yeah, I know Jason. Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah, knows Jason.
Yeah.
Small world.
For constable, so I've got to put a plug in for him.
All
That's right.
He was a big football player down at Bradley Central High School. Got to plug the Bears.
Yes, he was.
Yes, I remember him well.
Both ways.
All right. Well, thank you, CC.
Thanks so much for calling.
Have a great day.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I just love our callers. I say that every week, but I really do.
Unions. Let me just ask you unions now. How many different unions were up there? And being in the South, that's a little strange that we had unions, but in a mining town, it may not have been.
Well, it is unusual for the South, and they and again at the turn of the century, 1899, 1900, 1901, you had two major companies operating in the basin. You had what refers to as the Copper Hill Company, which was Tennessee Copper Company, and the Isabella Company, which was Ducktown Sulphur, Copper, and Iron.
Let's so get this phone right here. Hey, good morning, live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Sherry Delk.
Hey, Sherry.
It's
Hey, Sherry.
this morning.
We're cold this morning. How are you?
No, I'm great. I'm at my friend Phyllis's house eating her good food she's fixed for me. She's the one that I told you that was raised up in Ducktown and knows a lot of the history there, and she wants to talk to you.
Well, sure. Put her on the phone.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Hello.
Good morning. You're live on the air, and what is your name?
Phyllis Swink, and I wanted to tell you that I was born and raised up there, but Dr. Hyatt was my second cousin.
Okay.
And his brother, Parks Hyatt, was attorney there on the main street of Ducktown.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the Nazarenes and Dr. Hicks and just a lot of people up there.
Now, did you have any family work in the mines or anything? Or
Yes.
Okay.
My grandmother's brother was killed in the mine.
What was his name?
Shoot, let's see. I can't remember. Watts was his last. Brady Watts.
Brady Watts.
And my father worked there, but he worked up above doing the metal work, all of that. And then when the mine closed, he went to Wilmington, Delaware. And my papa was a bookkeeper at the store at the mine, Julius Hyatt.
Okay. Well, that's, there were probably 4 or 5 times as many people working on the surface as worked underground. So there were a lot of times we think everybody that worked for the company was a miner, but that's not true. More people worked on the surface in other departments.
Yeah. Every time I go up through there, I go through Isabella just to look around. It's all the old company homes have fallen down. And afraid of cave-ins, really, but I go.
Well, the areas that are at risk, they have those fenced off now. But you're right, the town of Isabella is disappearing before our eyes.
Yes.
What street did you live on?
Let's see, the one that was on the right side, if you're coming in from Ducktown, I don't even know what street that was. I lived right across the street from the big schoolhouse. It was 2 or 3 story schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
They tore it down.
The old Ducktown school?
No, in Isabella.
In Isabella.
My mother's first cousins was Collins, and they taught school up at Burgertown, on up above Isabella.
Mm-hmm.
They were 3 maiden Spencer's sisters, and she taught school up there. And then later she taught school in Ducktown. But I left up there when I was about 15. But, I go back and still know everything and everybody.
So was you born up there?
I was born right on the North Carolina-Tennessee line. Papa Julius Hyatt owned 500 acres right there, and I think all the grandkids were born at his house.
So what did you think about Copper Hill growing up? Was it just normal life?
Yeah, but my mother and everybody came to Cleveland to get work during the war years, and that's how we ended up here. But I've been gone from here many years to California, but I moved back. I love Tennessee more than I did California.
Smart person.
That's
smart
a good
person.
idea.
Yeah, but I enjoy listening to your
Thank
show.
you so
Well,
much.
thank
and tell
you, Phyllis.
Sherry thanks for getting you on the phone for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
somebody said you were a good cook there, and we were hungry.
It is good. I've made country fried steak and gravy. It's the first time I've made it in years, and it is good.
Ooh.
God,
You should
you're
see
making
these two men's
Oh, we're
face.
drooling over here.
Thank you for listening, hon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Where
I
were we?
love those first-hand
Right.
accounts.
Oh, I agree. Sorry.
That's okay. You're fine.
So anyway, the two companies, turn of the century, they're both beginning to organize to get active
This is
unions
in
on the ground.
1900.
This is 1900. And ultimately, the Isabella Company went under the flag of AFL, and the Copper Hill Company under the flag of CIO. And this is before the two major organizations had merged.
Combined, yeah.
So they were separate. And they're working under the chemical and metal workers unions, the overall flag. It's not UMW, which is primarily coal mining. But, of course, once you get into the 20th century, you start to see the different crafts have their own union. So if
Like
you're an
elec-
electrician, you're IBEW, but you're going to be part of the CIO if you're working
Every
for
union
Copperhill.
want to get their part of the pie.
Well, of course, and
Yeah.
and each one can represent their workforce. A Boilermaker may or may not know what an electrician even does. So,
But they hope so.
well,
Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello, Ron.
Hey, how you doing?
Neil.
Just fine. Couple of questions, I guess, about geology of that area up in there, which I know zip about. All I know that is dirt. But no, for example, and I noticed things like this more since I've gotten older. But for example, going across Smith Mountain up there, back into Kimsey Highway,
yes,
there's a stretch through there where the dirt is just black. And it looks, of course, it's more evident in the little road that's across Smith Mountain. You can see it, but it looks nearly like asphalt. I just wondered what that signifies, what kind of minerals and so forth. It's just nearly black. I don't know if it signifies coal or what.
Well, let me start out by saying I have a history degree, so the little bit I know about geology is what I've picked up from talking with the retired geologists that work for the company. And with that said, I've limited all my questioning to the ore deposits themselves and the geology actually right in the basin. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not coal, simply because I do not know of any coal that occurs on that side of Chattanooga. Now, when you get west of Chattanooga, you've got some large coal deposits. But I can throw this in for what it's worth. The what's considered the basin in geology terms, this whole region through the Ocoee Gorge and up through the basin is referred to as a supergroup, which basically means the rocks and minerals that occur in that area are different than all the surrounding areas. So we've got a little corner that's all part of the Great Smokies Formation, but then you have the Ocoee supergroup inside of that, because there's some things that occur in that, probably 50, 60 square mile area that you do not find throughout the rest of the Smokies.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
another thing I've noticed, too, it's just simply because I have noticed it, it's kind of interesting to me. That's like up in the Ocoee region of the mountains. There are places up there that are just really sandy.
Mm-hmm.
And it will range from that to, like a clay-type soil.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing to me how much it changes in a really short amount of space.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know that it will answer these questions, but if you go on U.S. Geological Survey's website, which is usgs.gov, and once you're on their website, if you get into their little internal search box and type in Southern Appalachians, they did an in-depth study of that area back in the mid to late 90s and produced a little video and a handout and a lot of these materials. We can't get them any longer because everything now is on the internet and they no longer print them or produce them. But I know you can go on the website and find that materials. And they also produced a very detailed geology map of that region that may answer some of those questions you've asked today. But you'll have to get online to find it.
I appreciate that. Like I say, just things I've noticed, and I tend to notice more, I guess.
You're looking down more,
Well,
Neil.
we slow down, too. We slow down.
That's true. I appreciate it and enjoying the show.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Neil.
Thank you.
Before we go any further, the Ducktown Basin Museum.
Yes.
Tell us about it, when it's open.
Okay.
How to get there.
All right. Well, the museum is located off of Highway 68. So if you're coming from Cleveland, you're going to take 64 east, past the Ocoee River into Ducktown, and then you'll come off the 64 onto the 68 interchange, travel north, but it's almost immediately after you get turned off 64 onto 68. On the right-hand side of the road, you'll see the sign and the entrance for the museum. It's Burra Burra Street, and we've got a big sign there, and you take that road up to the top of the hill to the old mine office is the main museum display building. And we are open January, February, March, Tuesday through Saturday from 9:30 a.m. till 4 p.m. And I'm going to go on and throw this out there. If it snows and schools are closed, we're closed, because if you've ever been to the museum, it's almost a 45-degree hill that you turn off on, right. And when it gets slick, it tends to stay that way for a few days.
When you go on Burr Street, you got to go all the way up to the top.
Right.
You'll pass several old buildings,
right.
But the museum,
just keep going.
And it's a great little museum. What's the cost?
It is $5 for adults, $4 for seniors. Children between the ages of 13 and 17 are $2, and between 7 and 12 are $1, and under that's free.
And they have a nice little video there. Yeah. When was that video made?
That is the most recent version. We probably redid it about 3 years ago. It was probably 2009, 2010. Mm-hmm. It's about 11 minutes long, but it gives you a nice overview from the discovery of copper in 1843 up till close to present day.
It's a good little video.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You know, if you're up in that area, it's just good to go through. Do you think there'll ever be, we were down in Dahlonega recently, and we went down into a gold mine. Now, let me warn you about going down into a gold mine. When you go down into the gold mine, you have to come back up out of the gold mine. So
and we
if you don't like walking, don't go down in the gold mine.
And it was pouring down rain outside. So we thought, well, that's something we can do in the dry. Well, what we didn't realize that there were quite a number of places that the water was coming in from outside, and it was nearly as wet inside that it was outside, and it was very cold. So be prepared when you go. Let me ask you this.
Well, let me finish this. Will there ever be a tour down into a mine in Copper Hill?
I seriously doubt it. Once they stopped mining in 87, and again, the access to the mines in the basin are through vertical shafts. We can't walk down a staircase like they do to get into the one there at Dahlonega. And once they allowed them to flood, they now have pumps on the surface that hold it at that elevation. And to go into the mine would not only mean, pulling the water further down, which you could do that. That would be the easiest part of the equation. But then you'd have to put some type of a shaft, hoist, and an elevator in to get you in and out. And I'll be honest, I am afraid to know what we would have to charge for a ticket to cover the liability policy.
What about it? Just a bungee jump?
Well, we could push you off in the mine with a brick tied to your ankle.
Yeah, that may have been done. I don't know. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron and Debbie.
Hey, Miss Ella, how are you?
Good morning, Miss Ella. Are you staying in and staying warm this morning?
Oh, I'm out shopping.
You went shopping?
Yeah, I'm out here at the dollar store.
That's awful cold.
Yeah, I hope you didn't stay outside too long.
Well, it's nice and sunny out here right now. It's warmer.
What have you been drinking this morning, Miss Ella? Antifreeze?
No, I ain't drunk nothing yet, but
yeah.
I had a good time last night with the Collins Brothers band.
Where were they at? Pokey's?
Yeah, they were good.
Joe Collins is a really good act. I mean, Joe and his brother and the band's are really good.
Yeah, when they don't play all slow numbers.
Well, now, some people like to slow dance. Not everybody's a boogie-woogie girl like you.
Well, I know. I'd like to slow dance, too, if I had a partner.
Well, we'll just have to find you one.
There you go.
Anyway.
Thanks, Miss Ella. Always nice to hear from you, hon. Hey, stay inside. You don't want to get too cold.
I know it.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Right now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If somebody's wanting more information about all these things we're talking about today, I know that you have a wide variety of things there at the store, at the museum, do you?
Yes.
What kind of things do you have?
We try to carry books on our area, both with the basin and then the surrounding counties, including the stuff on Caney Creek that you produced. We have a lot of locally made or area-made jewelry. Different people in the area make jewelry
nice
for
looking
us.
Stuff.
And then we've got some stuff we order through some wholesale gift shop suppliers as well. And we carry a lot of rock and mineral specimens, both local items and then others that we get from some wholesalers. and we try to carry a lot of books on geology because that's an interesting topic for a lot of folks.
Is there frogs up there with 3 legs?
Haven't saw any 3-legged frogs.
That used to be of course you always hear that because of the chemicals and that the wildlife was changed. How true is that?
Well, it certainly, I don't know about change, but if you say the absence of, because when that landscape was barren and denuded, there was very little wildlife found in the basin. And if he came through, he had to bring his rations with him because there wasn't anything to eat. And because of the impact of the runoff into the river and, the days before the Clean Water Act when you could just discharge whatever you wanted out of your facility, there was a period of time that the Ocoee downstream of that area was devoid of life.
Yes.
I don't know about any mutated life, but it was just devoid.
There was nothing there.
Well, at Parksville, that used to be the bluest, clearest water in the world.
Right.
Didn't have any fish in it. Now the fish has come back now.
Right.
We always laugh on the shows that when I'd get ready to go to Parksville swimming, I would never wear my good swimming suit because the chemicals would eat it. Now, I didn't have enough sense to think about what it was doing to my body, but I didn't want to ruin a good bathing suit.
Well, that's the right choice. That's the right choice.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Mr. Ron. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Bullet.
Hey, Bullet. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing okay. I'm trying to stay out of this weather we got.
Yeah.
I want to ask your guest if he knows. I actually turned. I was coming from Ducktown one time. I turned off to the right and ended up on 411 Highway. I know some little quaint names in roads, the Hanging Tree and the Crooked Dog, and
Hanging Dog.
Had to get them names.
And Ducktown and Turtletown.
The ones down below, I am not as sure of, but you're right. We've got some very unusual place names. Now, as far as in the basin, Ducktown and Turtletown are both English translations for Cherokee words that describe those villages. Kawane, which is place of the duck, and Shiloah, and I'm probably mispronouncing these, which is place of the turtle.
There are not many of us can argue with you.
True.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then you've got, Fighting Town. Which, according to what I've read, there was a Indian ball field there, and their version of what we would call lacrosse today looked like they were fighting to the people that were watching them, so they named it Fighting Town.
Well, they would actually play to the death occasionally. Yes. I mean, it was if there was something to be settled, it was settled on the ball field, and it was a rough game.
Mm-hmm.
I like them names. I think they're cute.
I think it's wonderful.
But, we've got Hell's Holler and Buzzard's Roost and Windy Ridge, and I think those are pretty descriptive in their own right. The Roost was down in Ducktown where a lot of the workers lived, and Hell's Holler, well, I think we can figure that one out on our own.
What about Farner, Tennessee? Where'd that name come from, Farner?
I believe that is because there was a flag stop there, Farner. I believe that was for an official with the railroad.
Okay.
Yeah.
How you and Ron? How are you and Deb been doing? Are you?
We're trying to thaw out.
I tell you what, it's been cold, and I think Ron's been going to these wrestling matches, isn't he?
Yes, sir. I have been. And this coming week, if you're a high school wrestling fan, the number 1 team in the state will be at Bradley High School Baylor, taking on the number 5 ranked Bradley Bears, and then Thursday night, the number 2 team, Cleveland, will be there taking on the Bradley Bears. And then the next week, the number 6 team, Soddy Daisy, then the 11 team. So Bradley's got a real tough road the next 2 weeks, and these are important, particularly the Cleveland, Soddy Daisy, Walker Valley, to see who will go to the state duels.
I'm to see that. I'm not really a high school wrestling fan, but you can get interested in it. I'm out tomorrow, Ron.
You may have to do that now. And say Baylor is very, very good this year, so the Bears really going to have their handful. Bradley has only lost 1 time this year, and that's to the Archer, Georgia team, which is ranked 23rd in the nation.
Wow.
That's the only time Bradley has lost this year. But now they're getting some really tough people. They beat McCallie, and they beat several other teams. And we got 4 or 5 kids that are ranked 1 or 2 in the state right now on the Bradley team. Unfortunately, Baylor and Cleveland has the 1 and 2 guys too. If we're 2, they're 1, and we're 1 and 2. So there are going to be really great matches. Like I say, Bradley is probably a year away from taking over everything again. They were there for about 22 years. But I'm going to say, now all my Cleveland fans are going to say, oh, sure. Yeah, well, we can hope.
Well, let's just go Bears, and it's good talking.
That's right.
That speaks highly of this region, that all these teams in the region are that
the tough thing is that you have a hard time getting out of here to go to the state, and so the number 3 team might be sitting here who would have, if they got to go, they would be third in the state, but they don't get to go.
They don't even qualify. Right. So, Soddy, Daisy, Cleveland, and Bradley are the 3 best public schools in the state every year for 20 years. Walker Valley now is sliding up in there, and now you got the smaller schools, Notre Dame, Hickson, are starting to be competitive now, and then Ooltewah comes and goes, and now you got a new school down there in East Hamilton, which has a big crowd. So basically, the teams in this area can beat almost everybody in the state. I'm not going to say Wilson Central's not very good this year, or Science Hill, or some of these other guys, like Father Ryan, or some of these other teams. So.
It's pretty amazing. My family came into the basin in the 1850s. Immigrants from the potato famish that was going on over in Ireland and such, and came in here, I'm sure was speaking Gaelic, no English, and you know where they went? Straight to the most dangerous jobs.
Of course.
Of course. Immigrants get the grunt work and the most dangerous jobs, but they were found living in, is Hot House fairly close?
Yes, Hot House Creek.
Yeah, they were living in Hot House in 1850s, and some of them were listed as immigrants, being SISSONs and Robersons, and they married all those pretty raper girls. Now, when I looked out to the east yesterday and saw a lot of snow on the big mountain, is that Big Frog Mountain I'm seeing, or what mountain is that? Most likely,
I think we're either seeing, when we look from Cleveland, we're either seeing Chilhowie, and I think Chilhowie's the one that's easiest for us to see
really
from
big
Cleveland.
mountain,
right?
yeah.
And then Big Frog is sort of beyond that, because when I leave my house in the morning to go to work, I can see Chilhowie perfectly coming off of my
What
hill.
a beautiful view it was yesterday afternoon with all the snow on it. So did you get any snow up in Copper Hill?
We did. It tried to snow for the better part of the morning. It was falling, but luckily it was just random flakes. But the tops of the mountains were all white, and it had been cold enough, and enough had fell that it stuck to the trees up there. So I tell people all the time, I have the greatest view ever when I get to my work. I mean, if I'm in a bad mood, I can get over it really fast when I get out of the car at work.
I guess
that view is spectacular.
And if you've never been to the museum, you can walk up and it's gated or has a big fence around it so some foolish person can't hurt themselves. But there's a giant, enormous hole there.
Yes.
What is that?
That is a cave-in into part of the mine at Burra Burra. That's a collapse into a section of the works. We would call it a planned collapse today. They made a decision in the 1920s to rob an area high, to take more rock overhead than they normally would, because the grade went up, and they wanted to get that good material out, and they knew it wouldn't fail all at once, and they could get in and then get out and just not go under it any longer. And it was their property above it, so when it did fall, it wasn't someone's backyard that was falling in.
How big a hole is that? It looks big from where I'm standing.
Well, it is pretty big. It's probably I'd say a couple of 100 feet across, and there's probably 75 foot down to the water line where it drops.
So it's 2 football fields?
Oh, at least, yeah.
It does, you look at now, and I've tried to throw a rock down there.
Right.
I ain't got there yet.
No.
It's farther off than I thought,
It's further off than you think. Because we're standing above it, you get the illusion that it's closer. But if you go on Google Earth and look at it, you'll realize that that's probably about 700, 800 feet from the overlook to the first part of the water.
I was about 3 foot shorter with
every
rock
time.
through. Yeah,
skipping them in.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's a picture there in the museum of it from a satellite photograph. Is that right? What year would that have been?
That's 1973, and it was Landsat, the early NASA infrared satellites that went up in the 70s. And it is an infrared photo that's showing a wide area, probably from above almost to Knoxville down to Marietta. But the basin looks like a big white spot because at that time there was no vegetation, so it's showing up as a hot spot.
It sure did, and it was really something to see. My grandmother went to her grave believing that all those pictures they showed you on TV was just Copper Hill. She lived there. She knew what it looked like. But she did believe wrestling was real. The TV wrestling was real.
What about Potato Creek? That's probably one of the names that you always hear about being the most polluted creek in the basin. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's one of the popular names of saying it is still polluted.
Well, Potato Creek probably well, no, probably to it. It was polluted or impacted, but not to the level that Davis Mill Creek was. But the good news is Potato Creek is now considered to be in compliance. The work that Glen Springs Holdings has done has brought Potato Creek's back, their watershed, back into compliance. And when they came in and started working in 2002, one of the tasks that were placed on them by the state and EPA was that they would treat the flow of those creeks prior to them emptying into the Ocoee to keep that water out of the Ocoee until such time they do not need treating. And this year, the early part of 2014, they will be able to send Potato Creek back to the Ocoee Strait without treating it because they have completed the necessary work. And they're actually starting to do restocking of fish and stuff in Potato Creek. They've got it.
How
to
big
that
is
point.
Potato Creek?
It's probably, I don't know the stream flow rate, but it's a good sized creek. It's probably down at the mouth. It's maybe 17, 18, 20 foot across and several feet deep. Headwaters come out of the mountain in North Carolina and drain through the basin. It drains 3/4 of what we consider the territory that make up the basin. Okay. And Davis Mill drains the other quarter.
You're seeing why we invite Ken to be on the show. He can answer any question that Ron and I can come up with.
Or I can make up an answer.
Yeah.
That's right.
What is that picture of?
That is Ducktown School.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's early, with 1910 or something?
I'd say that's around 1910.
And so where was that at?
That was on the hill there in town, almost directly across from the museum.
And that's a good thing, too. I think there was a little bit of money up around the mines, and so
there
there's
was.
good photographs
There was.
up there. Well, folks, this has been the most interesting hour. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some of the deaths that happened in the mines up there, maybe some of the worst tragedies.
And the sheriff getting murdered, too, didn't he?
And we'll talk a little bit more about, I hadn't heard about that, some of the grants that thankfully the museum has gotten, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Glen Springs Holding, or we'll listen to your stories if you want to call us. We're going to take a few-minute break, and we'll be right back with you.
WOOP LP, Cleveland, Tennessee.
You need money overnight? Check into cash. Your time is tight. .com. Bank account's too low? Check into cash. So where do you go? .com. Do it online in a record time. It's the easy way to get money next day. Do a quick click from home at checkintocash.com. Just stay in the house, check into cash, and grab your mouse. .com. Get your money online, check into cash, right on time. .com. You can be sure it's secure from our bank straight to yours. Do a quick click from home at checkintocash.com. No time to get away, check into cash. You've got to stay home.com. Hey, that's okay, check into cash. You can do it alone.com. Any old time, do it online. Just stay in the house and grab your mouse. Do a quick click from home. Get your money overnight at the right website. Do a quick click from home. Go to checkintocash.com.
Wheeler Technologies has moved. Visit them at their new location at 490 Grove Avenue Southwest next to Bradley Rentals. Same great folks, same great service with a better location to serve you. Call Wheeler Technologies for voice, data, and security needs at 664-TECH. That's 664-8324. And remember, depend on Wheeler Technologies for the current time and temperature every day at 476-1111. Tennessee Alarm Contractor C1750.
You may know Mermaid Mattress has won the Reader's Choice Survey taken by the Cleveland Daily Banner, voting Mermaid the #1 place to buy a mattress in Cleveland. But did you know they've also won every year they've voted in Dalton by the readers of the Dalton Daily Citizen? And every year they have taken the North Georgia Chattanooga Times Free Press Best of the Best Survey. And now for the 12th time for the Times Free Press Best of the Best Survey in Chattanooga. Roger wants to say thanks to all the area voters in each and every survey in the area for making Mermaid Mattress the #1 place to make your next mattress purchase. Mermaid Mattress, Georgetown Road, Cleveland. Call 472-2486.
Mermaid Mattress Factory and Showroom.
Kiesler Incorporated is in the business of recycling your metal, and they pay cash. The only covered scrapyard around where you can recycle rain or shine. They're located off the bypass on Overhead Bridge Road. Automobiles, appliances, copper, stainless steel, tin, all metals can be recycled at Kiesler, and you can walk away with cash. That's right, they pay cash, and they are the friendliest scrapyard in the Southeast. If you have unwanted metal just laying around, bring it to Kiesler Recycling today and walk away with cash. Kiesler Recycling open Monday through Saturday, 7:30 to 5, or call for more details, 614-3000. Mostly sunny skies out there for your Saturday, but quite chilly today. We'll see highs only in the mid-40s. Clear overnight tonight with lows around 31 degrees. For your Sunday, we'll see a few clouds moving in and a 60% chance for showers, which could even be a wintry mix at times, especially late tomorrow afternoon and into the evening. Tomorrow's high near 48 degrees. That's a look at your weather forecast here on 99.9 Whoop FM. Looking for America's original music? You just found it at 99.9 Whoop FM. Listen and watch online at whoopfm.com.
Welcome back to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here in the studio at 614-5553. If you're from out of town, that's 423-615-5553. That's a lot of numbers there. We got Ken Rush from the Ducktown Basin Museum here, who is truly one of the experts to the area up there, and just unbelievable. He can answer all of our questions, or we just don't know better.
That's the real
story. He makes
story.
things real fast.
Yeah, that's why
you say it with authority.
That's why
people
Deb says
assume.
about Cherokee Indians. There's none of them alive to argue with her today. But
one thing really good about the museum up there, Ken, is when you go in there, you realize the people who are working in there truly love the area. Those
They
little
do.
ladies.
They do. We are very fortunate. The guides we have, both Joyce and Donna, grew up there. Their fathers worked for the company. Their husbands worked for the company. They know the history. And, and I tell visitors all the time, if you get me leading your tour, it's all about technology and numbers and dates. And if you get them leading your tour, it's all the interesting stories of growing up there and what it was like raising families there and all of that. So they're all social and I'm all technology.
There you go.
Both are good, though. I've had both. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, Ron and Debbie. This is Lynn Moore. How are y'all?
Hey. What's going on?
Y'all were talking earlier about the names up in that area, and when I was in the Coast Guard, there was a friend of mine, Bob Raper, who grew up in that area. And he told the story when he was in basic training, his company commander, a drill sergeant, asked him where he was from. He said, I'm from Ducktown. The guy looked at it, he said, yeah, right. He said, what is that near? He said, well, it's right near Turtletown. And the guy said, come on there. He said, what's the city near there? He said, it's Buzzard Roost. And he said the guy made him do push-ups because he thought he was lying about it. And he could not convince him those are actual names of places up in that area. And he tells that story every time we talk about it because he knows I live back in this area now. And I talked to him just recently. He said, hey, you been at the Buzzard Roost lately? And I thought, no, I haven't, Bob. Sorry.
Well, Red Dockery that lived here and way up into his 90s, every time I got close to him, he wanted to tell me that he came from Hanging Dog.
Yeah. I mean, it's hilarious. Evidently, he's one of the rapers from up in that area. Bob.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's funny.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye-bye. So did we have any major accidents where a number of people were trapped and killed in the mines, or was it mostly just one? One was too many.
Well, one's a lot if you're the one, obviously. But there were a couple of – the majority of the accidents did occur one person at a time. But the two largest accidents that ever occurred in the mines in the basin, in January of 1943, 9 men were killed in Boyd Mine in an underground explosion. You had a sulfur dust explosion. You don't typically find the gas that we think about with coal mining in a hard rock mine, but they had a dust explosion. The sulfur ignited and killed 9 men in 1943. The next largest accident, I believe it was 56. I have a mental block on the date for some reason. I always invert a number, but there were 4 men killed in a hoisting accident. Once the shaft work is completed, it's like riding an elevator. You're getting in a compartment, and it's on guides, and you have safety brakes and all of this. But while you're sinking that shaft, you're going up and down in a bucket. And these men were coming back to the top in the bucket, and it caught the side and tipped them out, and they fell back down the shaft. And so four were killed in that accident.
Well, the single accidents, were they just normal industrial accidents, got in front of something and electrocution?
You had that. You had electrocutions. You had men getting, maybe between a ore car that was coupling with another car. But probably the biggest risk, again, to the men working underground is what they call loose ground or balk ground. And that's not the whole roof falling in. That's just a piece scabbing away. And a piece the size of a large pumpkin is going to weigh 60, 70 pounds. And, if it drops now and hits between the three of us, well, that was a close call. But if it hits one of us, even if we're wearing our hard hat, we're still probably going to be hurt pretty bad, if not fatal. So
we had a family member that just a big chunk of rock. He was an engineer of some sort. Big chunk of rock just decided it was going to fall, and unfortunately, he was at that spot, and that killed him instantly. And then Gudger Smith was married to one of my great whatever aunts, and I believe he was killed in that 56 explosion. I don't know.
I think he was killed in the explosion. That name sticks in my head.
Smith, and I do have a picture of him if you think that not in miners.
I think Arnold Tarpley, who come on one time with you, I think his grandfather was injured.
Yes, he was injured in that explosion.
The sulfur dust.
We're actually a project we're working on and hope to do something with it this year is a memorial listing of the men killed in the mines. It will always be a document in progress because we're going to be adding names to it that families bring to us. But right now we've got about 80 or so names looking at the period from 1890 to 1987.
Wow.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Didn't a bulldozer fall down a shaft or something with a guy one time?
Yes, that would be officially the last fatality associated with the mines, although the individual was not working in the mines. They were moving calcine, that product we were talking about earlier. They were moving calcine on the surface with a dozer, and he got out over one of the old mine works, and the weight, the vibration caused the roof to fail, and he went in the mine in that dozer, and ultimately when they recovered him, he had drowned. He had collapsed down into the lower part of the mine that had been allowed to flood. But yes, that would be technically the last fatality with the mines, and that would have been in the 80s.
When it was in operation, did they have to pump all the time?
Well, they pumped daily, but it was not around the clock. The water make was not so great that you had to pump 24 hours a day, but they did pump water off daily.
And you told me that I believe that like in coal mining, you do have the collapse, but this was hard rock, so when they drilled through there, which was harder, I imagine, to do, but it didn't need a lot of reinforcement.
Most areas did not need a lot of bracing or shoring. Now, large open areas, they would come in and do the rock bolting or the roof bolting in. And some areas that they knew were weak or had the potential to fracture, they would crib it. They would take timbers and make a crib. That's a photograph you've got up of a crib section of what they called a grizzly, where they would load the ore. But most of the tunnels and the openings were open. They didn't require any bracing.
Okay. Is the caller still on the line?
No, she left.
Okay.
Now,
I thought I saw the light go
off. How big is the rooms? I think you told me one time you could set a helicopter inside one.
There's some of the stopes that they would create would be large enough that, yes, if you could get it in there, you could have flew it. The tunnels got larger as the equipment got larger. So, in the 1850s, they were probably, 4x6 and not a lot of space. But
just wide enough to get through there.
Just wide enough to get through. But by the time you get into the 1970s, some of the main drifts would have been 10x14, 10x12. The stopes themselves would be anywhere from around 60 foot wide to the thickness of the ore, which could be more than 100 foot. And then depending on the angle of the ore, it could be several hundred feet vertical. So some of these stopes were very large, and your light would not shine across it.
Speaking of lights, that was one of the most fascinating things I think of being in the museum is you guys talking about the clothing and those little helmets.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us how they lit the way.
Well, when they began in 1850, they worked by candlelight. And they had a little holder that was designed to use in the mines. It had a spike on one end that you could drive into a timber or set into a crack. It had a little hook on it that you could hook over a ledge or something that was in the area you're working. Or it had a flat bottom where you could set it beside you. And the men worked by candlelight. By the 1870s, you began to see lights that they would wear on their caps, and these were called sunshiners or coonshine. The sunshine lamp companies who developed them, and they were designed to burn a heavy paraffin, but the men were responsible for purchasing the lamp fuel, and they figured out that coon fat worked pretty good in them as well. So locally they began to be known as coonshiners, and by that time they're wearing a soft canvas cap with a little leather shield that supports the light and keeps the heat right off your forehead. It kept it a little bit off your cap. And that was the light used in the mines until around 1910 when you began to see the carbide lamps come in. And it's not until the 30s that you start, the late 20s, early 30s, that you start to see a true hard hat. They're still working with canvas caps and hats through the teens and 20s. And then by 1939, you see the electric lights with the battery pack you wore on your belt replacing the carbide.
And probably a big battery. What about the clothing?
Well, it was, typical work clothes, overalls, work shirt. The real thing about the clothing is once you get into the modern era, you didn't carry it home and wash it. Mm-hmm. So when you got off shift, you took your work clothes off and put them on a hook that had a basket setting on it that you put your boots and gloves in, and then you pulled it up to the roof of the change house where it would dry and be out of the way of the next shift coming in. And all you kept in your locker was your shaving kit and your shower gear and your civvies that you put back on when you got off work. So
Imagine
they wore those
clothes smelled really nice.
They did, and I'll just tell you this, if you had a problem with that, you were probably working in the wrong department because, if everybody stinks, nobody stinks.
Well, that's true. That's true. What about the company houses? We talked about that on break.
Yeah, we did. The company, both companies, Isabella and Tennessee Copper, supplied housing. But one point is there was never enough housing for all employees. So everyone that worked for the companies did not live in a company house, and you generally had to go on a waiting list to get in a company house. But they were sturdy, well built, but simple. Typical. It appears that they either purchased some manufactured homes from Sears or some other industrial home manufacturer, and then copied them, knocked them off, and reproduced their own. But your rent probably started out in the teens and 20s, a few dollars a week. I think by the 60s and 70s, most of them were renting from $30 to $40 a month. The company maintained them. They would come in and paint it once a year for you. I've heard families talk about the wives would get the kitchen painted a different color every year just to make it different. But they were not fancy, but they were well built and they were well maintained because, it was part of your pay, basically. The company, that was a perk. Even though you were paying a rent, you weren't paying market value.
And then at the end, they sold those houses. They had the first right. If you lived in it, you had the first right of refusal.
If you were, when the company began to get out of the housing business in the 70s, the people living in them got right of first purchase. So if your rent at that time was $35 a month, you could buy the house for $3,500.
That's a good deal, though.
It was a good deal. Of course, they've been paid for dozens of times over by then.
And there's a lot of the people who worked in the mines who still live there in those houses, right?
Correct. Yes.
Mr. Helton's one of them.
Mr. Helton, Donna, one of our guides, lives in an old company house that they purchased.
Now, on up towards where the museum is, across to the left, back there on the hill, it seemed like there was a lot of railroad houses maybe back in there. Was it a lack of lumber sometime do that, or did they just steal the plans and build them like them?
Well, the company ran sawmills outside of the denuded zone, so I don't think lack of lumber was a problem. But I think don't reinvent the wheel if it's already been invented. If you see something that's working, there's imitation's the sincerest form of flattery. So,
and they just made their own kit.
Now, time the 70s got here, they weren't doing the smelting by lumber anymore. They probably had gas or something. So when did they stop doing the?
Okay. 1890s, once the railroad's completed in 1890, they can now buy coal and bring in the coal to run the furnaces. So the furnaces by 1890 are running on coal rather than charcoal, but they're still having to heat roast the ore on timber or wood prior to it being smelted. And at that point, they're logging in Georgia and floating it down the river because there's nothing left to cut in Tennessee. The first part of the 20th century, they developed a way to eliminate the roasting step. So by 1904, they're able to smelt the ore without roasting it. So it's coal, and they're using coal up until the 40s. And around 1940, they began to switch to electric furnaces because now you've got TVA and there's ample electric power available in the basin. And they actually were phasing the blast furnaces out in 41 and 42, but, something happened in December of that year, World War II starting after Pearl Harbor, and they kept the blast furnaces running through the war for production, to keep the increased production. But as soon as the war was over, they phased all the coal-fired blast furnaces out, and it was electric furnaces from that point forward.
When did they start catching the sulfur?
The first plants went under construction in 1907, and they were operating by 1909.
Yeah, but so the sulfur, cutting all the trees down to build houses and to braces and to burn, didn't help the land. And then the sulfuric sulfur coming up, creating sulfuric acid, which made acid rain, killed what they hadn't killed.
Correct.
And then there was nothing there to keep it from washing away. And how many layers of earth did that go down?
Well, most accounts that you read today estimate on average 6 feet has been lost off the horizon in the basin. Of course, there's gullies that are 20 and 30 foot deep, so that's just an average across the board.
That's just where the rain come in and just kept washing away.
But you can say all the topsoil is gone. And in most places, all the subsoil is gone. You are down to the layer of soil that should be found, 5-6 feet below surface.
Like we saw in the 60s there.
Right.
It was just nothing grew.
Well, you had eroded down to a sterile layer of soil. It wasn't so much that it was, quote, polluted, is that you had eroded down to a layer that was sterile. It just didn't contain what was needed to support plant life.
That first 50, 60 years is what did it, and then after that it started becoming better, but it was too late then.
Right. Okay. By the time the technology changed, the damage had been done.
Yeah, and it took a long time to fix it. Good morning, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, this is Jack Sanders.
Hey, Jack.
Hey, Jack.
How y'all doing okay
We're
today?
good.
I'm apologize, I'm traveling, I haven't heard some of this, but have you talked to anything about using the old wagons to haul the copper ore down? I know my great-grandfather, Jim London, that was part of his business, was to supply some of the wagons with mules down at the bottom of the mountain. And if you get into some of that, I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Well, tell us what you know, and Ken will jump in with what he knows.
Well, I just, after the Civil War, when he moved back into the area, that's what he did, was to train mules. And apparently they had 2 or 3 camps set up as they hauled the ore out of the mountain. I don't know exactly where it went, whether they're going to Cleveland or Chattanooga. But one of the camps was down where the old Jim London farm is down, right before you get to, right after the four lane starts coming down 64. But that's where he made his money, I understand, if he made any, was training the mules and resupplying them. I don't know if they changed the mules every camping every day. I'm just curious to what.
They'd have to be mighty strong, didn't they?
Yeah, that's we hadn't talked about that. That's a very good topic. When they began mining in the basin in 1850, there was no road yet connecting the basin to the rest of the country. So initially they were hauling raw ore on muleback over the Cohuttas to Ellijay, and then from Ellijay on to Dalton. And it doesn't take long to figure that's a losing proposition. So by 1853, they had cut the road through the Ocoee Gorge to Cleveland, which at that time had a railroad. And what we call the Old Copper Road, and modern 64 now sets on part of that roadbed that was created in 1853. And they were hauling it by wagon to Cleveland. And at Cleveland, you had a rolling mill that was taking the refined, because by that time they're also smelting the ore in the basin before they're transporting, so they're moving copper. And they had a rolling mill at Cleveland that was producing sheet and bars and ingots and whatever the customers wanted, and then it went on the railroad. And the trip from the basin to Cleveland was 2 days by wagon, and they camped overnight at what was called the Halfway House, which is very near where Greasy Creek comes into Parksville Lake.
There's a historical marker.
There's a marker there. The actual location for the Halfway House and where the haulers camped is under the lake now, but that was the midway point. And then as they came into Cleveland, they camped again, and I believe this was the area you were referring to, close to where the bypass is now coming out of Cleveland. It was what was called Frogtown, because a lot of that used to be swampy and it flooded. And that's where they brought their load in, and then they camped there overnight. I have a feeling, you know, the locals in town probably weren't too keen on them hanging out in town, and they probably weren't too keen on paying for that, so they were happy to camp out in those fields for the return trip. And on the way back to the basin, they would haul supplies for the copper companies, or they would haul produce to be sold in the stores, because there weren't any farms in the basin to support the population's food base, so they had to bring food in as well.
Didn't Mr. Roth sort of get money going both ways?
He got money going both ways. The road coming out of the basin to what we would now call Parksville was a toll road, and it was he bought controlling interest in the toll road, the Plank Road Company. And then he began to also buy a lot of the freight companies that were hauling it back and forth, and then also began to buy farms in western Polk County and eastern Bradley County that were growing the foodstuffs that were being hauled back to be sold in the stores. And the teamsters, the drivers, were paid by how much they hauled. And, of course, they want to haul as much as they can, but the loadmaster wanted to make sure the wagon got there without breaking down. So he would limit the amount they could haul out based on what he felt like the condition of the road was and the weather. But it was roughly 500 pounds per animal. So if you're talking about a 4-mule team, they're hauling 2,000 pounds. If you're talking about a 6-mule team, they're hauling 3,000 pounds. So I could see where a person repairing and building wagons would have a steady income.
Thanks, Jack.
That's good. I have to answer some of the questions I had, but that's what I've heard all my life, and it's probably in there because that is swampy right in there where he had his farm and stuff.
Right.
Now, we also heard at Frogtown that you could get adult entertainment and adult beverage.
Well, I'm not.
Jack wouldn't know anything
now,
about that.
Not saying that your grandfather did that now.
No, I understand, but I could see how you could.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jay.
Bye-bye. Tell us about the grants that you recently got.
Well, it's technically probably not a grant. A lot of people don't realize this, and this is probably a great venue to get this word out. I work for a nonprofit. The Ducktown Basin Museum is actually Ducktown Basin Museum, Inc., and we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We administer the property, the Burra Burra mine site, for the state of Tennessee and the Tennessee Historical Commission. So the state owns the land and the buildings. The museum, the collection, belongs to the group I work for, and we have an agreement with them that basically says we look after their property for them. They allow us to use their property to house our museum. They do make a operating grant available to us that covers about 35% of our operations, and the other 65% we make up through the door with admission and sales. But because the state owns the buildings, they're responsible for primary maintenance. And we've always gotten maintenance money. If the roof leaked, they fix the leak. But a lot of that maintenance dollars is just that. It's maintaining. It's not actually preservation or restoration money. And we've been able to get what's called a capital project request funded through the state, through the governor and the legislature that has begun. We've got one approved coming up that's going to allow us to actually begin to do true restoration of some of the buildings on site. And this coming year, we hope to complete work on what's called the clinic, which was originally where the company doctor was located before they built a hospital over at Copper Hill. This was a company hospital. And the plate shop, which was the welding shop, both of those structures are slated for full restorations. And then we've got improvements that will be made to the hoist house to give us more opportunities for events and fundraisers. It's a good building, but we need better lighting. We need more outlets for power. Right now, everything has to be oriented one way because we only have outlets on one end of the building. And then we're also, if everything works out, we'll get the powder house restored. And the idea is then next budget cycle, we will put in capital requests for the other buildings. And we've had a commitment from the Tennessee Historical Commission that they will continue to push these up to the governor until every building on site has a full restoration
that's
done.
the best thing I've heard them do.
Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Hey, Ron.
Hey.
Would you please remember Johnny Crumley tonight as you go off the air?
I sure will. We've got a song we play for people.
Well,
thank you, honey.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
It's exciting.
That's fabulous.
It's exciting.
Well, and sometimes we let things get in such disrepair, and then it's impossible to bring it back. But I think that those things are within reach to bring those back. But now, before we went on the air, I went, oh, good, air conditioning at the hoist house, and you said,
I said no, we won't be getting the hoist house air conditioned.
For someone that hasn't seen it, describe it to them.
It is a large brick structure. If we were saying stories, it's probably 3 stories tall, although it's just one open building with truss roofs. The dimension just slipped out of my mind, but I want to say it's probably about probably about 60 foot wide by about 150 foot long, the interior room. I did have
3 stories high.
I did have a electric contractor tell me that we would need more BTUs of air conditioning than currently set on Copper Basin Hospital, Life Care Center, and the high school, and then we still probably wouldn't have enough to cool that building. So the reality is we live in Dixie, and it's hot in the summertime.
It is hot in the summertime.
Well, at least you can be dry.
Yes.
We were up there one time for a pancake breakfast that was fairly early in the morning, and it was quite nice.
Yes. Let me ask you, a lot of immigrants come into the area when these jobs come available. And now, what names of some of these immigrants and where were they from, and are those names still in Polk County?
There's really 2 waves of immigrants that came into the basin. There was the initial wave in the 1850s when the mines opened, and you had first off you had skilled miners coming from Europe, the Cornish. Coming out of the UK, from Wales, and a lot of those Cornish men came in to be the foremans and the supervisors and the smelting engineers, and then there were the Irish and others that were coming at that same time that were making up labor, and most of the ones coming in to make up the labor, well, they drifted on down the line as time went on, or they intermarried with local families, and there's still descendants of them here today. The Cornishmen, there's still a few families in the basin that date to those ancestors, and you've got like the Nankivals and the Jories, and I've gone blank on one of the other family names. They're still present in the basin. And then you had a second wave of immigrants, and it makes sense, in 1890 after the railroad came in, because the operations not only reopened, but the scale increased. So there was a lot more demand for labor. And again, a lot of these were unskilled immigrants. That second wave, they were coming from countries like Serbia, Croatia, Cyprus, Italians, Moroccans. We actually had a gentleman do some research for us and found this in the census data. And at that time, Tennessee Copper had agents at Ellis Island that was getting you as soon as you came off the boat and cleared customs. Here's your letter of introduction. Here's your train ticket. Go ride the train to Copper Hill and get off, and there'll be a job for you. And then we know, because we've got some accounts from that era, you know, if Uncle comes down and finds work, he writes back home and says, hey, if you can get here, I can get you on. And again, most of those were unskilled labor. And in the 20s, you began to mechanize a lot of the operations. Machinery began to take the place of doing it by hand, and those unskilled workers moved on to the other parts of the country because the jobs weren't there any longer.
So did you have
for 'em.
certain immigrant groups that did certain jobs, or was it intermingled as far as you can tell?
It appears to be intermingled as far as we can tell. You know, the locals tend to refer to them all as Italians, or they actually used a nice ethnic slur for Italians. But, you know, the joke was on them because very few of them were Italian, so they were calling them the wrong name. So
there you go.
Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Yes, I'd like to get
Hey, Doug.
Hello, good morning. I'd like to get your guest to speak on the. I've read about cranberry bog being developed up there.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that, but also what the water quality is today that's going in down the Ocoee River. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
And I'll stand by and enjoy the program. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Doug always hangs up and listens. That's
okay.
why I'm
Sure.
trying to shoosh him off the phone.
Okay. Well, the cranberry bog, that's an interesting little side story on the basin. They probably had been there for a while. The locals were aware of them. But in the early 90s, I guess they were, quote, rediscovered, and there were a couple of areas on Chancytown Creek where they were large cranberry bogs, and they're not really the bogs like we think about in New England where they farm raised them, because these areas do not stay flooded all the time, but they stay damp enough that the cranberries could survive. And one of them was on the property adjacent to Ducktown Elementary, and the elementary school, when it was up in the old Kimsey Junior College building, actually formed a nature conservancy, and they built a trail down to where the cranberries were, and were the kids were developing it, and of course now the school is closed and the elementary school's over somewhere else, and that area has gotten grown back up. And the cranberries need sunlight. So once it's gotten overgrown again, they're not doing as well on that property, but they're still there. I went down last winter and checked it out, and they're still available. Just upstream from that area, downstream, I got turned around there, was another large tract that TWRA actually purchased and now maintains it as a wildlife area, a larger cranberry bog that TWRA maintains on Chancytown Creek. And it is supposed to be the southernmost cranberries in the United States.
That is so interesting.
Go ahead, caller.
Hey, it's the names Isabella and Cisco. Are those related to the Spanish, like the Stoda and Pardo come through there?
I don't believe so. Isabella was named for a early company official in the 1850s. It was his wife, and that's where the name Isabella came from. I think the names, if they're for a person, they have more to do with the early officials with those companies that were developing the mines in the 1850s.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did he say Cisco?
He did. Yeah.
Okay, well, there was a lady named Sis down in that area, and she had a store, and her house is still standing, although barely, covered with kudzu, and so they called it Cisco after her.
Doug asked about water quality.
Yes.
And what about the cranberry? Let's get to the call right here.
Okay.
Is the cranberries eatable?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I've had them. Pretty tasty.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron. I have a question for that guy.
Yeah, Red.
When I was just a small kid, my papa used to take a big old truck over at Copper Hill, and he would get loads of this stuff. He called it isinglass. What is that?
Oh, I think you may have stumped him.
You have stumped me. I am unsure.
What did it look like?
It looked kind of like glass, but it wasn't glass. It would peel off. He'd make us stay away from it. But he called it isinglass.
What did he do with it?
He would take it down in Georgia somewhere and sell it.
You've got me.
Well, now this is the first time we ever stumped Ken.
But It was he called it isinglass.
Isinglass. I'll have to do some checking on that.
But I know he went over there somewhere and got that. He'd get big old truckloads of it.
What did you know what color it was?
It was just clear like glass.
Okay. I will get an answer, and I'll get it to Ron and Debbie. So maybe next Saturday I can get them an answer by email, and they can let you know.
What that stuff was.
Well,
That's
you got
a
all
good
of us
one.
now.
Yeah. Good question.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Water quality.
Yes. Again, once Glen Springs Holdings signed their agreement with the state and the EPA in 2001, 2002 to begin cleaning up, remediating the basin, almost all of that's driven by water quality. And they agreed to treat the flows of Potato Creek and Davis Mill Creek prior to them emptying into the Ocoee until they don't need treating. So by 2004, those plants were online, and the water quality in the Ocoee began to improve dramatically at that point. And as we said earlier, Potato Creek is considered clean now, or considered natural, normal, and they're not having to treat it. The upper part of Davis Mill was in pretty good shape to start with, and they ended up diverting it into a pipe and now pipe it straight to the river. So they have more capacity to treat the lower section of Davis Mill. And they will have to treat that last about 3 mile of Davis, or I may be overstating it, maybe 2 mile of Davis Mill Creek forever. But the water is treated now before it goes into the Ocoee River. So beginning about 2005, you no longer saw contaminants leaving the basin via those two creeks entering the river.
Drinking water. Where do you
Well,
get
the
your
drinking water, Ducktown and they've now added Turtletown and a lot of Isabella on that system. They get their water from a man-made lake that was created north of Ducktown, a Campbell Cove Lake, that was actually built as a water project and a recreation. So Ducktown's actually got, excellent drinking water. Copper Hill buys their drinking water from McKaysville, and that's pulled out of the Ocoee River upstream of the basin, so that's not an issue as well. There were a few families in the area once they allowed the mines to flood that it messed up their wells, and the company had to pay to put them on city water. But the drinking water for Copper Hill, McKaysville, Ducktown, and Cherokee Hills to the west is all considered excellent water.
Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, it's Northern Wetback here. Red was talking about isinglass.
Yes.
That's what they used to call mica.
Okay.
We learned something.
And they used to put it in the furnaces.
Yes.
So that would tie into Cleveland with the stoveworks.
Yes.
I'll bet you that's what it was.
I bet it was too. And there's quite a bit of mica associated with the waste rock around the mines. And so they probably had sections where they were bringing it out of the mines in quantity and in enough purity that it would have been commercially available. But I've never heard that word isinglass before.
Neat byproduct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Usually if we don't know the answer, somebody does.
Burra. Somebody says, what does burra mean? Someone said it means donkey, but burra I thought meant a company or a city, townships.
Like a borough.
That are put together more like a borough.
Well,
which one?
It works for both of those, but
Yes.
that's not where our name came from.
Well, it come from the mine?
It actually is a word from Australia. When our mines were being discovered and developed in 1850, the Burra Burra was a large working mine in Australia,
Right.
and that's an Aboriginal word, the original inhabitants of Australia, and it means great or large. So Burra Burra means very large or very great. So the Burra Burra Mining Company that was chartered in 1853 and the Burra Burra Ore Deposit get their name from that mine in Australia, and that's an Aboriginal word.
All right.
Great.
Hey, go ahead, caller.
Excuse me.
Good morning.
Yeah.
This is Brenda.
Hey, Brenda.
When Red said isinglass, it made me think the only time I've ever heard that word in my life, and this shows you how my mind is, I have short-term memory loss. But I remember an old song that it said, the words of it were, the car has isinglass curtains you can roll right down in case there's a change in the weather, which would have been a very, very, very old car. and it was made, and the curtains were made of isinglass.
We're all sitting here smiling and nodding our heads. That sounds very interesting. Thanks, Brenda.
That's the only thing I could think of.
Well, that's pretty good.
I had never heard that word before.
Right.
Bye-bye. Just for a moment, let me tell you that next week we're still working on next week's show, but on January 18th, some of Rex Dockery's family's going to be here talking about Rex and Red. The next week, Joe Guy's coming down from McMinn County, and he's going to talk all about the Star Mountain and the hermit that lived in the cave. February 1st, Mike Bell and Charlie Mincy, one of the big moonshine runners out of Georgia, is going to be here talking about dirt track racing and moonshining. And then on February 8th, we're hoping that P-Dab's going to have the wag back in his tongue, and he's going to be here to help us interview his aunt.
Right, and we also, I think, we have Anthony Dunn sometime for Black History Month. He's going to come in and talk about Green Chapel out of the Charleston area, and his family was involved in doing that. Go ahead, caller, you're live. Go ahead, caller.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think isinglass was a sheet form of silica, and it wasn't in real large pieces, but they could process it to make the curtains like the lady was talking about, and they used it in early electronic, well, probably wasn't electronic equipment, but it was early day radios, probably used as an insulator.
That's what I was going to say. It'd probably be a good insulator.
But it's just a sheet like silica, and it was translucent. You could see through it.
Very interesting.
Well, thank
Ken
you.
has learned something
I
today.
have.
That's a hard thing to do, to teach him
You
something.
should learn something every day.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much
caller.
for being a listener, and thank you for calling.
The sheriff was killed in Copper Hill. Tell us about that.
Well,
did you do it?
No, I did not.
Which sheriff was it?
I believe that was Lewis Wright, and he was ambushed.
Not good.
They had got a call out for him to be at a certain place, and when he showed up, they were laying in wait for him.
Who did it?
They never found out.
That no one. It's still a mystery.
Still a
What
mystery.
year was this?
This would have probably been the 1950s.
Oh, 50s. Okay.
So right after the 40s, when they had all the good government league stuff that happened down
And
there.
I may be off a year or two,
But yeah,
it's,
still
it's
it's
in
in
that
that time.
post-World War II period.
So now, did James Wright come out, or was he one of the good government league sheriffs, or was he on the other side of that? Do you know?
I think, and I haven't researched this that deeply, I believe Lewis was probably neither side, and that may have been what got him on the outs with both.
Oh.
But is any idea why they ambushed him or anything? I mean, there's no stories or.
None that I'm aware of.
Well, you
people
know-
still don't talk about it a lot,
Well,
to be honest.
we have tried for 4.5 years now to get someone to come on that was actually there when the Good Government League stuff was going on, and so far no one's willing to talk about it,
Yeah.
which tells you how very seriously it was all taken
Well,
and still is.
All those families involved in that are still there.
Yes.
Every one of
That's
them.
why-
are
Both
still- both
That's why
sides,
nobody
yeah.
will talk to us.
And, they talk about the Battle of Athens quite often, which
Right.
happens in the same time period. There was a couple of people wounded up there. People died in the Battle of Polk County up
Yeah.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know one time they called, the governor called down and says, "Hey, we hear you're having a problem down there. Do you need help?" And they said, "No, we got it under control." They didn't know the Good Government League had already taken over the courthouse,
Mm-hmm.
and that's who answered the phone and told the governor, "No, we don't need any help."
No, we don't need any help.
So, but people actually died there, and it was the same. If you know the Battle of Athens story, it's the same reason that they were having the battle in there.
Now, I'll take that back. I think a couple weeks from now, if someone were to call in and ask the question, I think Joe Guy would talk about the Good Government League.
Joe probably is probably the best source I would know to speak to that.
He is very
Do you
good.
carry any of his books up at the basin?
Actually, we've sold out. I need to get some more of Joe's books because we've carried them in the past, but the vendor I was using I no longer have, and I need to get with Joe and get his
And
books.
your products are soon to be available online.
We plan.
That's excellent. So
We plan right now. The museum's website is ducktownbasinmuseum.com, all one word.
Mhm.
And currently, you can join as a membership online or make a donation. But our goal for early this year, and our webmaster's a volunteer who has a real life and job, so
Yeah.
we'll have to work around their schedule. But to make books and items that we can keep in stock available online. The jewelry, it'll be tough because it always changes and we never know what we're going to get. But we are hoping to get the DVDs and the CDs that we carry and the books
You're going to
online.
have to get you some cool mining shirt.
Yeah.
Made up. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, that would be
You know,
fun.
I own about 1,000 T-shirts, so you would think we already
You just
had
sell
one.
yours.
Yeah.
And I'd like to thank you. You carry our book and DVD for Caney Creek, and one of the biggest sellers we have of our book and DVD has come out of your museum
It's
up there.
been a good seller for us.
And we really appreciate
Well,
it.
and for folks that don't know, that if you happen to live up that way, you also have a few copies of Confederate Voices, which
We
have
do.
a lot of Polk
We
County
do.
folks in
We
it.
also have Confederate Voices for sale in our gift shop.
So that's good. So now, is any other murders and in a mining town, I would say that after work there may be some saloons and there may be some drinking and there's got to be some fights and arguments.
Well, you work hard and you play hard, and there's also businesses that are designed to separate a man from his paycheck as soon as he gets it. So it was not unusual.
Entertainment.
It was not unusual for fights to break out in the Roost over the weekend down in Buzzard's Roost, and it was not unusual for a gunshot or two. And more times than not, no serious blood was drawn, but there were incidents, and that sort of just goes with any rough, tough town.
Was there any moonshine made up in those hills?
Oh, there was. There were more than a few. Those businesses have to be supplied, and there were a couple of ventures that I'm sure. If not their primary source of income, they probably make their Christmas money that way.
Well, I was listening to some of our audio from the documentary we're doing on dirt track racing, and of course a big portion of it is folks talking about moonshine, and they said, well, you had to understand that it was an economically depressed area, and I'm talking about Dawsonville, Georgia,
yeah, on that North
and said
Georgia
you
mountains.
couldn't really farm on the hilly side, but you could grow some corn down in the bottomlands, and not only did it make the moonshiner money, it made the runner money. Somebody had to sell the jars, somebody had to sell the sugar, somebody had to, and it kind of created it stimulated the whole economy in the area, not just the bootlegger or the moonshiner. So that was a really interesting point that I had never thought about how it ripples out.
I think you worked in the chicken processing, or you worked in lumber mills, and that was the jobs in Dawsonville and them North Georgia mountains. So, we're talking about people 9 years old and 13 years old who ran moonshine
And
for years.
as Gordon Perkle says, somebody asked, well, they weren't old enough to have a driver's license. Said, well, it didn't matter because if you got stopped, you was going to jail anyway, 13 or not.
Right.
I love it.
That's the least of their problems.
Was a law enforcement presence in Copperhill, Ducktown, or that? Did you have your own police department, or was it the Polk County Sheriff's
No,
Department?
they had their own sheriffs or own police as well. And that was, you had your local municipality, and then you had the Polk County Sheriff. But, as typical of my understanding, typical of most rural communities, the High Sheriff was called the High Sheriff for a reason.
Right.
And it's still true today. A county sheriff is a very powerful political office.
He is one of the 5 constitutional officers of the county.
Right.
So,
my great whatever grandpa was a blacksmith during the Civil War, lived in Copperhill. And I know that there was a lot of Confederates up in that area, including him, and it's the Bandy family. There's still tons of Bandys
They
up
sure
there.
Are.
Go ahead, caller. You live. Caller?
Hello?
Good
Hello, go
morning.
ahead.
You're live on the air.
Hello, this is David's mom.
Hey.
David Swafford.
Oh, hey, David Swafford's mom. How are you this morning, sweetie?
Well, I wanted to tell you the name, that Isinglass curtains.
Yes.
In the movie Oklahoma.
Oh, is that where the song comes from?
Yes, it is. Gordon McRae sang it.
Well,
and I've listened many times.
Well, I'm learning new stuff all the time. Well, thank you, David's mom.
Well,
by the way, your son is one of our favorite people.
And I had to call David and get your number.
Thank you.
I knew I had to hurry up.
You're good. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. See, we have people with short-term memory loss, and when we put all of our memories together, it makes one really good one.
We're pretty
If
good
you want to call, we
together.
got about 10 more minutes. 614-5553. We're talking about the Ducktown Basin, Copper Hill, Turtletown, Farner,
Points East.
Buzzard Roost.
Not Booger.
And Hanging Tree, and we got Ken Rush in here from the Ducktown Basin Museum. Great place. If you haven't been there, we hope you take next Saturday to drive up there if it's not snowing.
How long have you been the director there now?
24 years.
Well,
We're
good.
about to figure out how to get there.
He's been-
Yeah.
Go ahead, caller.
Hello,
Good morning. You're live on the air. You might have to turn your radio down.
Okay, wait a minute.
Okay. Go ahead.
My father was with Lewis Wright when he was murdered in 1958, March the 8th.
Who is this?
This is Peggy Lillard. I live here in Cleveland.
And now,
My father was killed the same night that the sheriff was killed.
your father was killed also?
Bob Rogers.
Oh. Now, was there any, do you know any, what happens?
All we know is that they never did find out who did it. They were over at a tavern on Turtletown, and somebody turned the lights off outside and shot both of them as they started in the building.
Wow.
Oh, my, Peggy.
Yeah, we never have found out who did it yet.
That makes it even harder, I'm sure. Well, thank you so much for calling.
Do you remember why they went up there? Did anybody say why they were going up there?
Well, see, it was on Saturday night, and the sheriff always went over there to check that tavern. And he asked my daddy. My daddy was a deputy. He worked for Tennessee Copper Company, and he went along with him. And there was another policeman with him, Carmel Gibson. But, they shot Lewis first, and then they shot my daddy. And the Gibson man, he lived on. He didn't get shot.
Well, that's just, you said 1958?
Yeah, March the 8th, 1958.
Okay, at that time, how many children were in the family?
Well, we had 10 in my family.
Oh, your poor mama.
I had two mamas.
You had two mamas.
Where were you living at?
I lived over at Copper Hill.
Oh, you were living in Copper Hill at that time.
I was born in Newtown. My daddy moved up to Copper Hill from Florida in 1927. I was born in 28 at Newtown. He worked for Tennessee Copper Company and worked there till he died.
Where did you go to school at?
Copper Hill.
Well, bless your heart.
Yeah.
How interesting. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Peggy.
I didn't mean to get on the radio. I don't like.
Well, that's okay. We won't tell anybody.
My sister-in-law listens to you all the time, and she told me this morning you were going to talk about Copper Hill. It's still in my heart. I love Copper Hill.
Do you have any pictures of your dad in uniform or anything?
He didn't wear a uniform.
Oh, he was just
He worked for the Tennessee Copper Company. He was over the guard system.
and they just made him an honorary deputy then, right?
He was he had 21 guards.
Wow.
He had to go around and check all the guard shacks, they call them.
Well, thank you, Peggy, so much for calling.
Okay, thank you.
Call back sometime. Bye-bye.
You know, I couldn't recall the name of the other gentleman, and I didn't want to call it wrong. But
right.
Isn't that amazing? And this goes to what Ron says at the end of the show every day, that you need to record all these stories.
Yes. Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yes, I worked up there in 59 and 60 when we were surveying for those roads.
Uh-huh.
And there was hardly a tree that we could put a reference point.
Who is this?
Those little pine trees would be about 4 inches in diameter, and they'd have 15 or 20 rings in them. They'd be so small, but there's very few of them.
Could you drive a stake anywhere?
Oh, you could drive a stake. It wasn't the gully patches. That's before the kudzu.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine lived on Windy Ridge and worked for the Copper Company. It's the only job he ever had. and he bought one of those company houses and moved it over to Postel, and his family still lives in it.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite the sturdy little houses.
Yeah, his name was Howard Newman. He worked there. Only job he ever had after he came out of the military.
That's amazing.
People used to stop at Three Bar Trading Post and get off the bus. That's about the only place to get anything. This is in the late 50s, and they wasn't familiar with the place, and they'd get off the bus and say, who bombed this place?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've heard that sometimes if the people there at Three Bears felt like they could get them going, they'd tell them that's where they tested the bomb from Oak Ridge before they dropped it on Japan.
Yeah. But Buzzard Roost, was it was a little community when we were there.
Right.
Next to that, the Mine City Baptist Church was up there.
Yes, sir. Still there.
And Ernest Arms from Cleveland was the pastor of that church at that time.
Yeah. Mine City's still a very large church there in Buzzard's Roost.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
That's good. All right.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling.
See ya.
Bye-bye. So did anybody ever race up there that you know of, Ken, as in stock car racing?
I tried to beat the bushes for you guys when you were starting to get your stuff. And, I got a lot of people said you need to call or you need to talk to, but I never could make a connection.
Well, a lot of the places have closed down their muffler shops and that kind of thing.
Right.
So we go there and it's empty.
Right. And I think the gentleman that ran auto parts there, Pistol Ballou, I think Pistol raced or had people that did race, but years ago he sold out to Pep Boys, and, the people
Pistol
working
Ballou
there
ought to
now.
race. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, Ron, David, it's Joe.
Hey,
Hey, Joe, what's up, buddy?
Not much. I've got something to say, but it's different from what you got.
Okay.
We lost another former employee of the Old Princess Theater
Uh-huh.
this week.
Who was that?
Bill Underwood.
Bill Underwood.
Bill Underwood. What did he do there, hon?
Well, he was like me, done everything.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting us know that. And when we go off the air, we're going to play Going Home.
All right.
Thank you, Joe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, the racers are kind of interesting folks. That was just such a big part of their lives. But once they sell out, they don't seem to have any of their stuff left.
Right.
And we did find a upside down trophy the other day, which tickled us to no end. That you got it if you rode your car over down at the Cleveland racetrack in the '60s. They gave you an upside down car on top of a trophy, and we've got one of those.
And $45.
And $45, which was a big
we've
thing.
got some stories that there's a couple guys that spend a lot of money on their race cars, and they racing on Saturday night, and if they don't win, they ain't gonna have groceries. So there's a couple of them knew where you hit the wall in Cleveland to roll your car over, so they'll have $45, $50 at least to buy groceries.
I probably have earned a couple of those trophies through my life anyway.
You just never got your trophy.
Never got my trophy.
Still waiting on that trophy.
Good morning, live on Old Town Cleveland.
It's T. Vandy.
Hey, T. Bandy, what's going on, buddy?
I've been listening after you talking about isinglass.
Okay, go ahead.
When I was growing up, we had coal heaters,
Uh-huh.
and they put those that isinglass in the front of the heater, decoration, and it reflected the heat, but you could still see the fire burning.
So like a little glass window or like an oven window.
Yeah, it didn't get real hot.
So what would somebody do if you picked that stuff up in a pickup truck? What would you do with it? See, that's the connection I'm not getting.
Somebody bought it.
They probably had a roller somewhere that they processed it and rolled it out in like.
So they could sell it like for scrap sort of thing. Huh. Very interesting, T. Thank you.
I'm betting the stove works here probably used it.
Yeah.
Thank you, T.
Wonder if that was
you.
used in enameled products.
No, I'm still going to do some checking because I'm curious as to
Now-
what the
now I got your
connection was
curiosity
between the
going,
stove
don't we?
works and the company.
Well, Ken, that's been it. An hour went by. Tell us one more time about the Ducktown Museum.
Okay, Ducktown Basin Museum. We're located right off of 68. It's 212 Burra Burra Street in Ducktown, if you want to put that in your navigation aid. And our hours, January, February, March, are Tuesday through Saturday from 9:30 a.m. till 4 p.m. The phone number is 423-496-5778. and our website is ducktownbasinmuseum.com.
What's the next big project you got coming up?
Well, we're working. Of course, we've got the capital projects on the building. A project that we're working, we're restoring and refurbishing a section of the boiler house, which is right off the hoist house, to do some additional exhibits. The museum's pretty full. We don't really have a lot of space for new exhibits, and we've got some items that were collected by a family of medical, local doctors and different from the company hospital. And then we've also got community-based items. So we're calling it the community/medical exhibit. It'll be, we hope to have it open by spring, and it'll be by appointment touring that section, and then open during all our special events. But we've got items from the old Ducktown Post Office and from some of the stores that used to be in the community, as well as the schools, and then from several of the area doctors that practiced in the basin, and then Tennessee Copper Hospital and Old Copper Basin Hospital.
Now, don't forget that, I get a cut out of this at the Burra Mine bungee jump.
Yes.
Yeah, just, that was my ideal there.
All right. Well, we'll be sure to
We'll let you be the first one.
We'll let you test it, right.
Well, no, I don't want to bungee jump anywhere. But in mine, it seemed like the problem is, as you got down, it'd be great, but it's that swinging back and forth coming up would be a little rough coming back up the
let's just
ship.
do gliding off the top there, Ron. You could glide right
But
down
I don't think
into
the
that
hole's
bottom.
that big. You just,
Well, you'd be surprised how many people have asked about putting a zip line over it, and I've said, I just don't think that's going to happen.
I don't know. Folks, thanks for listening to Old Town Cleveland. Every week we tell you that you got to get this history out of your closets and out from underneath the bed. You need to get names on pictures, share those pictures with people. You need to interview your relatives and friends and neighbors, because we'll always remember Pearl Harbor, but Deb says we may not remember Aunt Pearl. So if you're going to save the history of your family, your neighborhood, your street, your company old store, it's up to you. So next week we'll see you here on Old Town Cleveland at 10 o'clock. We got great programs coming up in January and February. We look forward to seeing you next week. And right now we're going to play a song for those people who have passed on.
All of my friends that I loved yesterday have gone. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. The songbirds are singing, the dell seem to say gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. Life here is lonely since they've gone before. Gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. The old weeping willow that stands by the door sadly sighs. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
You need money overnight? Check